Hello and welcome to the Godel pod. This is Francesca Platten and today I am joined by Jonathan Lucky, who is a delivery manager over at Sky. All views shared today by Jonathan are those of his own and not those of his employer. This is going to be a great podcast covering delivery. Jonathan, if you could please say hello to our listeners and give us a bit of an insight into you.
Yes. Good to meet you, Francesca. I'm Jonathan Lucky. I'm a delivery manager at Sky. My specialty is all things agile and product and software development, and really happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Amazing. Thank you for being here as well. So just give me an overview of your career history, Jonathan. How have you got to be a delivery manager at Sky today?
Yeah, I've kind of gotten into the tech side of things in a very, wibbly wobbly way. So early on in my career, I was a sales guy. So briefly did some sales stuff for HP and then moved over to a small tech company that specialized in business intelligence. It was almost basically like a startup called Christian Stephen CSS. So,
yeah.
And there was just doing enterprise sales, which kind of moved into enterprise implementations of said software. And I found that I got much more interested in the product than I was selling it.
Yeah.
And it was great. I became a product manager, and which was great. I learned not just a lot about the business aspects of building a product, so branding and understanding what are the customer needs and how to shape a product roadmap and all of those types of things, launching a product, but also the engineering aspects. So working directly with an engineering team. What is it like to work as a co-equal, those 1 a.m. nights trying to finish off a build, us trying to make things happen. At one point, we realized that things were not very good for us. We were not necessarily overly happy. Our stakeholders were not necessarily happy. And I guess together we were starting to make our customers unhappy. And so we wanted to do something fundamentally different in that business. So we brought in a company called Small Footprint. They basically did a whole agile transformation for us. We thought we were agile because for various reasons, but as many companies do. But after spending time with them, we realized that, we were very far away from it. And and they basically really worked with us for a few months. And the transformation was literally a transformation of the way how we work, how we think about our product, how we do engineering. All of those types of things was such a massive sea change for us. We went from, we don't know when we're going to get done, to we were putting out brand new builds of the software and delivering them to customers.
Wow.
It was fantastic. And ever since then, I said, I want to do it.
Yeah.
I want to help other people do it.
Yeah, no, I get that. So obviously that transitioned into your passion for delivery. Because I remember when we first met, it was infectious how much you enjoyed to talk about it and how you felt about it. So would you class that as kind of where you see yourself in the future? Is it staying within that product role?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I look at it as so very often organizations think of, product engineering and design and all these other aspects that go into make a product. They think of these as separate entities. Yeah. Where the reality is not one of those groups can really deliver any value to the customer on their own. Yeah. And therefore they need to work together. So what I found that I've kind of dedicated my career, at least in its current state, to is helping organizations understand that actually that's an ecosystem. Yeah. And it's an ecosystem that needs to work together every day, all day, in order to be successful, in order to build a product. And I've been really excited. I've been doing that for I'd say the last 8 years, specifically that specific aspect of it. And I really enjoy it, but who knows where my career will take me next.
Exactly. Well, obviously we're covering delivery today, and I think a great place to jump in would be, what is your definition of delivery? How do you see that within a business?
Yeah, leading up to this, I was doing kind of some Googling. I'm not going to call it research because that's a very different thing. Just doing some Googling, trying to see what's the official definition of delivery. And and there's a lot. I mean, there's obviously the dictionary version of that, which we pretty much know what that is. But what does that mean in a software context? The famed Martin Fowler, he discusses that mainly from an engineering standpoint of things like continuous delivery and integration. Basically, all of the actions of when an engineer is coding to when they're actually putting it in the production environment and maintaining it in that production environment. But I've seen another definition that was, all of the activities around making a product and getting it into customers' hands. Mm-hmm. So my definition would be delivery is the act of getting the entire ecosystem of product development to align itself towards generating value for the customer. I mean, for me, that's what I think delivery is.
So is that how you find delivery is best seen, when it's related to the customer, it's related to their experience? Because I imagine you've seen both sides where that isn't the focus. What's the difference, and how does that impact the business and delivery overall in your experience?
Yeah, I do think it needs to be at the customer needs to be at the forefront about it. Because very often we see delivery as a function of project management or a function of engineering management, getting engineers to do work and do it on time. But I think really, as one time I was interviewing a Scrum Master, and they were like, yeah, I've delivered every project on time and under budget. And I go, well, you can deliver failure on time and under budget.
Yeah, true.
So it really has to be about efficacy. Like, are we truly generating value for the customer? And is that value profitable to the business? Like, really, at the end of the day, whether something happens on time or not on time pales in comparison to, are we generating value? I'm not saying that things like deadlines and stuff don't matter, but we need to think about if we're not making any money, then what's the point? It doesn't matter if you're on time.
So what does it mean for a business to be delivery focused? I imagine this falls quite nicely into the, when businesses say, oh, we're agile, but agile has a very broad spectrum. Is that the same for being delivery focused?
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good question. And, a lot of times, and obviously people have lots of views on what agile is, often negative. And, some people go, oh, lucky agile is that touchy feely stuff where we talk about our feelings in retros and we play games and all those types of things. And I go, actually, like inherently, agile is about software delivery. I mean, literally the first line of the manifesto says we're trying to figure out better ways of building software by doing it, by actually building it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things in the manifesto and the principles about, like, collaborate with customer, generate value to customer, deliver to the customer as frequently and as early as humanly possible. So agile is literally about how do we work together in order to deliver something to the customer. Agile is delivery, in my view.
Absolutely. So how has this differed between places you've worked at? How has, one business said that, oh, we are delivery focused, and you've gone to your next career position, and they've also said, oh, we are delivery focused. How have you seen that differ between businesses?
So usually how I see it differ between businesses is who so to speak holds the reins, Oh, in other words, who's in charge of delivery is often the question you get.
Yeah.
The engineering manager is in charge of delivery. Oh, no, the product manager is in charge of delivery. No, the project manager is in charge of delivery. Oh, the program manager is in charge of delivery. The scrum master is in charge of delivery, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that does differ depending on the organization. And I find a lot of that has to do with leadership and what their view of who should be in charge of those things are. And B, what's their experience with whether negative or positive with particular groups that have been across the delivery of software. So if you've had a bad experience with Scrum Masters and Agile folk, you won't let them anywhere near delivery. If you found that engineering managers only care about writing code, then you're not going to let them anywhere near delivery. and so forth. But if you have positive experiences with any of those groups, then you're going to want them to be at the forefront of it. Is what I find.
Absolutely. Yeah. So in your opinion, who is best suited to earn delivery? So obviously there's a lot of different people that, depending on the organisation, can say, right, they're in charge of delivery, etc. But in your experience, who do you think is best to man, what's the phrase? Man the ship? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
Yeah.
Who in your experience is best to man the ship of earning delivery?
Yeah. Okay. So most execs are going to hate my answer because usually, right, from a top level business, and I totally understand why, is you want a single neck to wring. So you often I see a trend now these days where you have the role of the solution owner, where this one person is supposed to be in charge of hiring and managing the engineers, defining the product roadmap, managing the budget of the team, defining the schedule of the team, managing all their ways of working, managing all their meetings, blah, 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 owning the business context, owning the business KPIs, the technical KPIs. And you go, that's a lot.
That's a lot. That is a lot.
That's a lot for one person to have in their head. Sure, if you're a small startup, you can do that. But in a larger company of an org of 1,000 engineers, 2,000, 15,000 engineers, that's just not feasible. And so I would argue my answer would be, and I only answer this because I've seen it work incredibly well at many teams that I've established, is you create a kind of a triumvirate system. So what I mean by that is you have your product manager, because I firmly believe that you need a business person that is in the team or is a leader in the team, a leader.
Yeah.
You need someone, some sort of technical lead, whether that's an engineering manager or someone like that, who understands the technical aspects, that can lead the technical implementation, that understands how the platform, the architecture works. They don't need to be the expert on those things, but they need to understand that. So you now have a business person, you have a technical person, and then you need that third person. You can call them, I usually like to say, an agile coach or a scrum master. Sure. If companies are really firmly against that type and doing agile, fine, then maybe you can put a project manager there in that seat. I think that's fundamentally a bit different, but really you need one person that owns the product itself and the prioritization of value, one person that owns the technical excellence around that product, and you need a third person that knows how to get those first two to synergize together. And that's, I think, and I've seen that work incredibly well. Think of it like in the US, you have the Supreme Court, the White House, which is the president, and then Congress. And they are co-equal units that have checks and balances with each other. And those three need to work together all day, every day as a team, leading the engineering team towards building and delivering value to the customer. And those are the three people that we go after. And they have key accountabilities that we would yell at the specific individual if those accountabilities are not being fulfilled. So that's my view. Those three. Yeah.
So really what we're seeing delivery as is that it's not on one person's shoulder. You think it can actually be split into three fundamentals that individuals can pick up, but as long as they work together, you do get the outcome of really good delivery and meeting timelines, et cetera, et cetera. Is that a fair assumption of what you've just said there?
Yeah, exactly. And they need to negotiate with each other. And the reason why is because each has a particular focus. And those three overlap with each other, and that's intentional. So that ensures that nothing falls through the cracks. Because sometimes we like to put firm boundaries between, but that means when you come across an issue or a project or something that doesn't fit one particular, then all three of them just shrug their shoulders.
Exactly, yeah.
So
with having those kind of three individuals in an ideal scenario, what challenges can you expect to pick up? Obviously, I imagine, personalities can clash and things like that. But in terms of as a business, what challenge would there be to set up that kind of situation or that dynamic?
Yeah. The first is often money.
Yes. Budget's always
These are
there.
three. Budget's always there. Those are three, and those are leadership roles. So they're going to probably be compensated along those lines. And you might not have the budget to do it. The second thing would be talent. So it's those. Each of those roles requires a specific kind of person, and it's really hard to find those people. And so you may not always be able to have all three of those seats filled. And then the third is just straight up politics. It just comes down to at an exec level who has the greatest amount of influence, whether that's your chief product officer, your chief technology officer, your head of delivery, whoever. Whatever the politics happen there will likely inform the shape of that triumvirate, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was expecting you to say those three. The only one that kind of surprised me is that not surprised me, but I wasn't expecting, was the talent. But of course, you can't just fill a seat for the sake of filling a seat. If it's, there's a lot of things that go into team dynamics and everything, which it does lead me quite nicely into that next question, which is, how do you become one team? So you've got these three individuals, obviously, say budget's there, the talent's right, politics are hopefully all nicely going on and everything else.
Yeah.
When we first met, Jonathan, you told me that you go across to different countries quite a lot to be part of workshops. You're really big on kind of being team oriented and being present. How do you get a business to back that ideology and to also be equally as enthusiastic about being one team?
Yeah, it's hard and it takes time. The first thing is getting the business to try it, because most organizations have never experienced that kind of model and to create kind of the true sense of a team. They've only seen semblances of it. So you got to first get them to actually try it. There's lots of evidence out there that shows, both academically and anecdotally, that shows that it works, but you just need to somehow convince people to try it. Once they try it, that's when the real work begins. These are groups of people that are going to have egos. They're going to have pressures. So because these are different groups that have, technical people are on very different pressure from product people and so on. So you need to get them to understand and recognize the pressures that each other are under. You need to get them to negotiate with each other and learn the needs of each other so that they can actually work together as a team. And most importantly, you have to show results. And I always say, working tested product is the only measure of progress. It doesn't matter how good your design is, your requirements, how the shape of your code. None of that really matters unless you have a working tested product that's in the marketplace that customers are paying money for. And if you're going to form a group like that, that needs to be the first priority for that group, not the processes, not all these other things. Those things are important and we need those things, but we need to get that group collaborating together with the goal of they need to generate some result ASAP. Because if they don't, then, execs are going to go, well, what am I paying all these people for?
Exactly. So obviously in this ecosystem you describe it as, which I really quite like, defining those three roles, I imagine, is difficult, but has to be clear and concise, because otherwise you're going to get people clashing, but we need that overlap. So how do you ensure that's clear, consistent across everybody, and that they're able to communicate effectively to ensure that delivery is the priority? How would you manage that?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's lots of frameworks out there that help with that. Obviously the most popular out there is Scrum. And I think a lot of people think of Scrum as a process, but really what it is, it's a framework, or really a platform to create the right kind of conversations and negotiations, right? So there's all of those Scrum ceremonies you hear, sprint planning, review, retro, all exist for very specific purposes. And that's to have the right kind of communication at the right kind of time. And there are specific accountabilities in Scrum that help ensure that the right things are being handled, or at least can be surfaced if something's not going right. So And Kanban is the same thing. Same kind of ideas are there, just presented and executed in a different way. And then there's many others, XP, and so on. But most importantly, it's about you use those frameworks to create the outcome that you want, which is for these people to communicate, collaborate. So what I mean by that, for example, is the product backlog. In the product backlog, whether using Scrum, Kanban, or whatever, that is a representation of the direction of the team. And each product backlog item, whether that's, forget about user stories, tasks, whatever those labels are specific conversations points of here's the value we're trying to deliver. So then the product manager has the accountability to ensure that we are doing the most important things to the business and strategy, the most important thing. And the Scrum Master and the engineering manager's role is to ensure to keep them honest and to challenge it, right? Where it needs to be challenged. The role of the engineering manager is to make sure that that product backlog that we are making sure that the right things around technical excellence are there, right? And that we're executing on that in the most technical excellent way. These things are really important to the way how getting that level of communication going day to day happens. Things like reviews or doing regular reviews. It's not about just did we deliver it. It's is this thing good or not? And if it's not, what do we need to change right now today about what we're doing so that it can be good? There's no point in waiting till the project's done. Let's try to fix the problems right now.
Makes sense. So in terms of, obviously, you're at Sky now, huge organization. You've been at some smaller businesses. Comparing the two, obviously delivery will change naturally as the size of the organization increases. That's clear. But do you find that having either a large organization is better for delivery in terms of structure because they've got potentially bigger budgets and they can afford to have that set up, or is there also a nice sweet spot whereas in a smaller organization where one person can wear that hat but can wear it really well? What have you found?
Working in a smaller startup type company, you just wear many hats. I was a product manager there, so where normally bigger companies would have an army of product managers that each one looking after a particular feature or set of features. And then product marketing would be its own separate line of business somewhere else. In a smaller company, you're all of those things. Whereas, and say with engineering, perhaps in a smaller company, the engineers are the architects and they're the principals. They're doing all of those things all in one group. In a larger company, you're going to have architects and principals, and you're going to separate front end and back end into separate orgs and all of those types of things, right? So the key is, I think, whether you're big or small, is you want to maintain, I think Jeff Sutherland calls this, or maybe it was Kent Beck, fractality. What I mean by that is your body, right, is made up of billions of individual cells, yet your body still functions, right?
Yes.
These cells are self-sustaining, and they're literally organisms in and of themselves. They have parts inside of them. They are born, they live, and they die. They carry out a function, and they do that. And it's the same thing that we want to try to create as your organization expands, is to create the same level of practicality. You want to try and ensure that, just as a startup where you might have just one engineering team and that one single group of people or that leadership group, you want to try and now figure out how do you replicate that many, many times across your organization. The hard part is just, let's say you have lots of those, then how do you get them to A, collaborate, and B, operate cohesively towards the same goal? So you have to have two things, I think, is A, a strong set of principles and philosophies, whatever they are. I have my view of what I think they ought to be, but I don't want to be prescriptive in this. And you have to have a very strong goals and direction. And everyone in your organization needs to be able to quote those goals in that direction and with their eyes closed all day long. Everyone should know we are heading towards this. These are the things that I'm contributing towards that.
Yes.
If you try to do it in a very top-down way, it's not going to work. Or at least, well, it'll work. It will work, but very slowly.
Yeah.
But you need people to understand, here's the direction we're going as an organization. Here are our key goals we're trying to achieve. Now, you all need to tell us specifically, what are you doing to achieve towards achieving that goal? What are you doing to move the needle on that? And even if those things don't work, what's your plan to do something else if it doesn't work, right? So, and that's really key as you maintain the practicality where you have a relatively small group of people that can move forward and do their things, but they understand exactly what the goals and the strategy are as a unit, and they are able to carry out those goals and strategies as it relates, and they're empowered to communicate and collaborate with other smaller units, and that's really key. That's hard to achieve. There's a bunch. I don't want to be too specific. We don't have enough time to go into detail of exactly how to do that. But I think in principle, that's what you got to try to go for.
And that should be from small organizations to large ones, shouldn't it? You can always implement exactly what you've just said, but as you grow, increase the number of fractionalities. Have I got it right? Practicalities, yes. So it was a great way to answer that question, actually, because as a small business, you start as that one small unit, but as you said, as you grow, you can increase, those number of units, just making sure we're all communicating consistently, and at the end of it, making sure delivery is the focus, obviously. In terms of managing delivery, how, in your opinion, do we best manage delivery?
And so I guess when you're thinking that's managing in terms of knowing what people are doing, or
knowing what people are doing, but also kind of hitting those deadlines, making sure we're delivering value. How do we manage that entire process almost, which maybe we might have to split that up into different sections, however you best think.
Yeah, we should split it up, because I think some of it is if I think it through, there is an information radiation piece. So intelligence, how do we make sure management, especially in large organizations, they understand and can view what is the plan and what's going on, because they need to be able to communicate that to their stakeholders, whomever they are. So that there's an element to that. So there's information, radiation, intelligence. There is a decision-making piece, I think. Like, how do we make decisions? Who makes decisions, and when do we make decisions? And then there's just the doing of the work itself, because that's often what we forget about.
Yes.
We'll have all of these gajillion meetings of plannings and strategizing and documentation, blah, blah, blah. And then we forget, like, oh, yeah, we need to actually
have to do it.
do it. So I think the key is you need to have the right to manage delivery. You need to have the right feedback loops for all three of those things.
Yeah.
And those feedback loops need to happen relatively frequently as it makes sense for that group. I'm intentionally not being prescriptive about specific frameworks, because many of them have the idea of these feedback loops. But obviously I'll let the rest of the universe decide what they are. I have my opinion on what they should be. But the feedback loops is key. So in terms of information radiation, we need to think about what's the feedback loop for that, and what kind of information do we want to disseminate, quote unquote, upwards, and also quote unquote downwards. And we need to make sure that it's useful enough, and that we're also not creating unnecessary work, right? Who wants to sit around writing reports all day? No one wants to.
Nobody.
But we still, nobody. Who wants to sit in a status update meeting? Nobody. But you do need to, at some point, tell people what's going on. So you need to think about, how do we do that? So we need to go, maybe in a team, you want to have a daily feedback loop. That's daily stand-ups, for example. Maybe you want to have a wider when you talk about a wider organization, maybe maybe every 3 weeks you want to have some sort of feedback loop. Maybe every week you need to provide a status update of here's what we're working on, here's what we need, blah, blah, blah. The key is to keep it as find the pace, find the right amount of information that is going to be necessary for us to make a decision. I think that's key. I think the second part of that is, so we said information, the feedback loops around decision making. So again, going back to practicality, we need the team, the smallest unit in the organization, to be able to make as much decisions as possible. We want to shift as much decision making to them as humanly possible because they're at the Gemba, which means the place of work. They can make a decision right now, right then, at the place of work. Because if they have to wait for someone way up here to make a decision, now it's going to take time and it has to go all the way up. And as it goes up the chain, the decision making loses context. So we need to create a system where, the people who are writing the code, doing the work, make those decisions right then and there. And so that way that frees up the senior leadership to make the most important decisions.
I agree.
Do we spend $1 million on this infrastructure or $1 million on that infrastructure? Whether the button should be red or blue sounds like something that we should just let the team make. Right. So that's the difference in the scale. We should try and say big scale decisions need to be handled by the big scale people. Get the small scale decisions about, should it be blue or red? Should we put the button to the right? Should we, write the code in this way or that way? That should just be something that the team should just make. And if you have product people and engineering people and delivery people in kind of that same unit, then they can make those decisions. And they can just do it. And that frees up the senior people to make the big, heavy calls. And it frees them up to think very strategically about the direction of the business. And the third way is, again, and so that's the feedback loops for the decision making. Feedback loops at the last bit of just doing the work is that there's not really any formula for that. People just need to sit with each other and work through things. There's no process that is going to save you. You're just going to have to talk to people. Unfortunately, you're just going to have to work with each other. You just got to.
I like it. So really, management of delivery is very complex. Like, obviously, we spoke previously to recording this, Jonathan, and we broke delivery down into 3 different sections, but we've also broken the role down into 3 elements and then managing it as well into 3 different elements. So there's a lot that goes into it. I think a lot of businesses overlook that element or try and squeeze it all into 1 or 2 of those sections that we've discussed today. So it's interesting to hear from somebody who's really heavily involved in delivery, how you've seen it work, tried and tested, in kind of translating business requirements into something you can actually deliver. How do you do that? Talk me through that process. What considerations are there, and how do you go about it?
I guess this is where I can be a little bit more prescriptive. To mention, here's the technique that I use. I'm not going to say that it works universally because I haven't worked everywhere. But what I find, and I've just learned this over the years from various mentors and trainers and also experimentation myself. So, first, let's say we want to do a thing, whatever that thing is. We want to build something. We want to improve something, solve some sort of problem, whatever. The first thing we should do is have the meeting of the minds. We need to have, and when I say this is the people that are going to do the work. And if we are being fractal in our organizational design, that means we shouldn't need like 150 people to sit in a room to do that. We should probably only need like maybe 10 core people that are actually doing the work, including like a business person, like a product person, and then maybe another 10 supporting people, right? So that support that. You shouldn't need more than 20 people to be able to do this. You have this thing. Some people call it PI planning. Some people call it iteration planning, increment planning, or whatever, but just a simple session. I usually call it agile release planning because that's what my original mentor always called it. In that session, your goal is to do three things. First is to understand, what does the elephant look like? So as the old saying is how do you get 8 blind men to see an elephant? You get them all to touch a piece of it and then describe it. Okay. So, and that's the key there, is you get people to write down, what we set our objective. Our goal is to do this thing, or to increase churn, to increase revenue by X%, or to keep people on platform, whatever it is. And you say, okay, well, how do we do that? How do we do that? Everybody write down. Let's ignore user story formats and all that stuff for now. We're going to sit that stuff aside. Just write down, what are the things we need to do? And the engineers are doing this. The product people are doing this. Delivery people are doing this. Architects are doing this. We're all writing these things down in this session. And we just put it all down on paper, on different sticky notes, and put them on the wall. And from there, we eliminate the duplicates and all that kind of stuff. And we emerge with basically our kind of initial pass at a backlog. Certain techniques like journey mapping or story mapping, depending on the situation, right? To build a visual view of what that looks like, right? And so that way we understand what are the categories of what we're trying to do and deliver and what needs to happen. You can color code these things of, here are the engineering things that need to be done. Here's the product things that need to be done. Here's the testing things, or, you can color code it, tag it, do all those kinds of fun stuff. The next thing is you prioritize these things. You prioritize in this session, and then you also estimate. I'm not going to go into estimating. That's going to take up so much time, but you estimate it. The key is, I would recommend, just don't estimate in time. Just don't do it.
Avoid that, park it.
Just avoid that. But just think, but often the business wants to know a duration. So you can give a very broad duration, and there's ways to calculate that duration. And we could always go, that's a whole thing in and of itself too. Okay, so now we go, we're clear on what we want to build. We're clear on, coming out of that session, we should be clear on what we're trying to build, what we're trying to create. The first thing is then now we need to do is draw a little line to say, okay, in the next few weeks, we need to have something usable in the next few weeks. It's not going to be perfect. It's going to be ugly, but we need to get something that we could actually try and that we could actually use on a phone or on your keyboard or on it with a computer by the end of that. So do it. And we draw a little line and say, okay, that's that. All right. So now the next thing we do is we actually do it. See, we try to have lots of different meetings and to try to plan out all of these different things. No, we need to have this session and immediately start working.
Yeah.
The reason why is that we're going to fail. So we might as well fail immediately at what we're doing, because everything that we've done up to this point is an assumption. And when we spend too much time trying to plan things out, we end up burying ourselves in a lot of unnecessary things.
Yeah.
And then we don't realize any failure till later on. So let's hurry up, build it. Let's start that first thing. And we're going to discover a billion things that we did not know about in the beginning. And that's okay, because we only spent a few weeks planning this out, or less, actually a few days planning this out. Now we know what to do next. We refactor our big board of our journey map and stuff based off of what we learned. Now, okay, let's go again. Let's take another few weeks. And the idea behind this, and this is the core thing with Agile that we all forget, is it's not about, here's a million things. How do we then break it down into sprints and deliver it? It's what is most important to the business? What's our first step that we need to take to that? And then let's try to get to the working bit that we can satisfy the customer value as early as humanly possible. And so we repeat that cycle and we constantly review it. And 9 times out of 10, we find that about 30% of what we thought we needed going into this was not valuable, was unnecessary. But you only find that through the journey. You rarely find that out before you start. So that's, I think, an important thing there. I could go into more detail about each of those things, but I don't want to put you to sleep.
I just really love how you break things down. I'm not super technical. So for me, delivery, before coming into this, I had an idea and an understanding of it, but actually, as we've discussed today, you've really broke it down into things that make sense of what delivery should look like. Actually, 20 people, get it done, get the planning done as quickly as possible, and just jump in and see where we go. And I think as I speak to kind of a lot of different businesses, delivery gets translated very differently, but you're all trying to achieve the same thing. So I find it really interesting that there's so many different ways to look at delivery. But actually, as you've just described it, if we broke it down logically, I think it could be a bit easier to manage, especially.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can, and obviously I oversimplified a lot, and especially if you're trying to do this for an org of 1,000 engineers, that's incredibly hard. So, but you have to figure out, how do you repeat exactly what I just said, across 100 teams?
Yes.
And you repeat that. And really the key is you need to both organizationally and architecturally ensure that each of those 100 are capable of doing exactly as I've said, without needing all 100 of them to all talk all at the same time. So, and I won't lie to you, that's really, really hard. But I think in principle, we need to keep that principle, that flow in mind at all times.
Yeah, amazing. Well, Jonathan, I'm all out of delivery questions for you, but I have one more that's not quite delivery focused, but I think you'll enjoy it. So for everybody listening, Jonathan is from New Orleans, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, not well, I'm not, but my mother is.
Yes, sorry, that was it. What is your favourite thing about living in England?
Oh, wow. What is my favorite thing about living in England? Okay. It sounds really silly, but as an American, this is a very novel thing, unless you live in New York City. I like the fact that I can just walk outside of my house, walk around the corner, and go to a cafe and have a coffee. That sounds really, really simple.
Yeah, it does. I was not expecting that answer at all.
I know, you expected me to say Europe's at my doorstep. I can just go to France for a day trip. I mean, one time I went to Luxembourg on a whim. One day I just went and hopped on a plane and went to Luxembourg, which was cool. Amazing. But actually, I think fundamentally, I just like the fact that there's a kind of sense of closeness about things here. Yeah. And whereas in America, if I wanted to do that same thing, I would need to warm up my car if it's the winter time, hop in the car, drive, 5 miles down to someplace, to a Starbucks, sit in the driveway, and then drive back. Or I just enjoy the fact that there is a sense of a third place in here. The place you can just go and there's just people and you can just have a coffee and sit and reflect and enjoy the world around you. And unfortunately, and I do truly love my homeland. Unfortunately, you don't see that as much. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that I really, really enjoy here. New Orleans does have that sense of place, though, because you were just there, right?
Literally just there. So I felt like you could just kind of pop out and things, but I do understand exactly what you're saying. Like anywhere you go in England, you can just walk somewhere. Whereas obviously with me just in America, everything's pretty much a drive or a commitment to kind of go. You can't just pop out. So I do get that. Your answer's a lot better than mine. Mine was going to be, I love a Sunday dinner.
I mean, I do like a Sunday roast. Sunday roast. Yeah, they're
so good. Honestly, I love Sunday dinner.
Sunday roast is good.
Yeah, so good. Well, thank you so much, Jonathan, for being on our podcast today. You've been amazing. I feel like I've learned a lot and I'm really looking forward to sharing this. And I look forward to seeing you again in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much, Francesca. Hopefully we can do more of these if you ever have me back.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.